7:38 now, and more than 30 years ago, thousands of people were given contaminated blood, exposing them to HIV, hepatitis C and other infections. The government has since apologised, but the victims still haven't received compensation. Well, today a debate is taking place in the House of Commons about the scandal, with campaigners planning to protest outside. Andrew Evans from Evesham contracted HIV and hepatitis C from contaminated blood products and is one of those who's heading to Westminster today. Hi to you, Andrew.
Hi there.
Just tell us, why is it so important for you to attend the debate and the protest today?
Well, I mean, this is a bit of a cornerstone day in our campaign, which has been going on now for more than 20 years to try to get the government to recognise that there is support need around, and that we're not going to go away until we get it. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we've had infections of 4,500 people with hepatitis C. 1,200 of those were infected with HIV, and of those, 3/4 have died already. So we're talking of the HIV community, more than 800 people have died since that time. And of course, the rest of us, our lives have been absolutely shattered. I myself was infected with both viruses at age 5 in 1982. I was diagnosed as having full-blown AIDS when I was 14. I was in and out of hospital and at death's door for several times during the next 6 years or so before combination therapies came out. I didn't get a formal education. I haven't been able to follow a normal career path. I don't have security. I don't have life insurance. I don't have a pension. If I were to die tomorrow, which isn't unlikely, my wife would be left with nothing, and she'd be left to bring up our kids with absolutely nothing. So what we're looking for is not compensation from the government. It's a level of security. It's a support fund, if you like, just to be able to ensure that we're not left out in the cold by this.
So that's what you're hoping will come out of today's debate?
Yes. What's happened just recently is, well, two things. First of all, in Scotland, they've recently accepted proposals from a committee that they set up to look at this, to provide substantial support to those people who have been infected. They set up a memorial fund up there, which was attended by Nicola Sturgeon and Shona Roberson, the Health Secretary. They've really taken it on board that this is an important issue. They're taking on their responsibility. Whereas down in Westminster here, we've had proposals put out that would actually see real-time cuts of up to £7,500 in the support that's already offered to people, and a very much a don't care attitude from our government when it comes to our community.
Do you expect to get any further? Because it's taken this long. If people have been trying to bring this to the public attention, the government's attention, for 30 years.
Yeah.
Do you expect it to go further?
It's been very, very difficult. We're hoping that because of the Scottish initiative at the moment, we actually have something there that's firm and solid, and that we can aim for. We can push Westminster to at least match what their Scottish counterparts are doing. So we do believe that we're now further along in this process than we ever have been before. We know we're not going to get them to admit legal liability despite the evidence that we've got out there. So we're not talking about compensation. We're talking about wanting the government to fulfil its duty of care, and we don't think that that's an unreasonable ask.
Andrew, thanks very much for talking to us this morning. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Tony.
That was Andrew Evans from Evesham, one of the victims of the tainted blood scandal, who's heading to the House of Commons later today. Now, the Department of Health, they insist that it's listened to the concerns of victims and has been considering how to reform the support schemes offered to the victims. David Cameron announced last spring that £25 million to boost the reformed schemes would be on hand. But that's Andrew Evans' story from Evesham.
A man from Evesham who was the victim of the blood transfusion scandal in the 1970s and 80s says they've been abandoned by the government. The Tainted Blood campaign group has secured a debate in the House of Commons today about the scandal. Andrew Evans, who contracted HIV and hepatitis C from contaminated blood, says he's been left with no security after developing AIDS as a teenager.
I didn't get a formal education. I haven't been able to follow a normal career path. I don't have security. I don't have life insurance. I don't have a pension. If I were to die tomorrow, which isn't unlikely, my wife would be left with nothing, and she'd be left to bring up our kids with absolutely nothing.
Now, the Tainted Blood campaign have managed to secure a debate in the House of Commons today. Now, in the 1970s and 80s, thousands of people were given contaminated blood, exposing them to HIV, hepatitis C and other infections. Now, the government has apologised, but the victims haven't received compensation. Now, as well as the debate today, thousands of patients will hold a protest outside the House of Commons. Colette Wintle from Worcester is one of the victims of the Tainted Blood scandal who is heading to London today. Morning to you, Colette.
Good morning.
Now, this is something that you've campaigned for many years. How do you feel about the debate and the protest today?
Obviously welcome the debate, but very frustrated that we're having to have yet another debate. There has been so many debates and consultations in the past which, outlined the whole disaster, the contaminated blood disaster, and the fact that over 2,000 haemophiliacs have lost their lives. It seems quite ridiculous that, the government have to be told again how serious the situation is. To be honest, and to be frank with you, I honestly thought that they had a true and better grasp after all the debates in the past of what was required to actually properly compensate people. And that's been made very clear across party. The support, has been there for some time. It seems to me it's the lack of political will that's the problem. And, if there's going to be a root and branch reassessment proper of the wholly inadequate funds that are currently in place, then, that has been set out for them already. Jane Ellison is more than aware of what is required, but she seems to be refusing to actually cooperate in as much as, laughably, the current consultation has not involved the community who's infected to be able to come together and discuss this.
Have you had any support from elsewhere at all?
We've had no support, no. To be honest with you, I feel that regardless of all the discussions that we've had, we've literally been abandoned by this government. There's no excuse for it. They know perfectly well what they've got to do, and we'll never have closure until they allow the examination of how this tragedy happened and put in place, steps to make sure it never happens again.
Well, this is the government in Westminster. Have you had some kind of support from Scotland?
Well, Scotland obviously have taken a step further and decided to support those living up there, and they have put down a set of arrangements which will improve the situation. But I have to say, even there, that I don't think it goes anywhere near enough in terms of recognising severe harm and damage and serious ill health that has been caused. And I just remind people that David Cameron actually apologised for this last year. He actually described this as something that should not have happened. Well, if you recognise that this should not have happened, then you recognise surely that there has been negligence by public bodies, and therefore you have to give the victims proper compensation. So
is that what you're hoping to achieve from today?
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned Scotland, but Scotland are doubling the amounts that are on offer at the moment. What this government's proposing to do is to collectively punish people by stripping away even more of the meagre amounts that they're currently getting. I would actually prefer to see Lord Archer's recommendations put in place, which is on a parity with Ireland, where they recognise need and loss. At the moment, they're only addressing one area instead of looking at the entire situation that affects every individual.
And how likely do you think that the debate and protest today will achieve something?
Well, I'm hoping what it will help to achieve is proper conversations, because that's not being done at the moment. We're not being allowed to sit down and properly discuss with the minister, what's required. I think that if they miss this opportunity, and they've been given many opportunities, but if they miss this, then it will be a stain on this government, as it has been on everyone prior to this, that they have failed to deal with the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS, and they have failed the 5,500 haemophiliacs who've been infected multiply with killer diseases, and obviously the ones who have died, sadly, and their families who are left behind, are living, in many cases, in poverty as a result of this, government state problem, which they refuse to acknowledge.
Colette, good to speak to you. That was Colette Wintle from Worcester, one of the victims of the tainted blood scandal, who's heading to London today for the House of Commons debate. The Department of Health insists it's listened to the concerns of victims and has been considering how to reform the support schemes offered to the victims. David Cameron announced last spring £25 million to boost the reformed schemes.